So
Yes.
we have an article that we wrote a couple of months ago and we've been talking about this, reviewing some of these articles, and this one really ties in because, again, when you look at the previous article that we just talked about, this we're talking about better together, Heroku plus MuleSoft, why you should use it. And these two particular tools and a lot of these use cases are setting up data lakes, setting up data integration, setting up data validation, and data cleansing. Like, all this ties into this stuff. And I believe we talked about Active Prime last week and their data generation and data cleansing, or data quality analysis, AI driven engine. And again, this is one of these things where it's like, that's all built on Heroku. It's a Heroku add-on, and if you centralize your data, you can start tackling this problem so you can use AI. So we're going to talk about, this article is pretty technical for, I wouldn't say pretty technical for a technical audience, but pretty technical for a business user audience. So I'm going to try to break it down at a high level, and then we're going to elaborate on it. We're not going to review and read the entire article to you guys. It'll be linked here and linked in the chat. Peyton will post it for you guys. Definitely take a look. It's very useful if you guys have been evaluating and trying to figure out, like, if you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, try to figure out, hey, how do I incorporate AI? This is going to be like, hey, start looking at these types of tools to help solve the underlying issues so that you can really leverage your AI. So let's dive into it. Better together, Heroku plus MuleSoft. So Justin's actually working on another article that is elaborating on this, but from the opposite perspective, where
almost planned this.
Yeah, where MuleSoft is enhancing Heroku's capabilities. This article is talking about Heroku enhances MuleSoft capabilities. Why you should use both from that perspective. There are reasons on both sides, but we're going to focus on this because that's the point of this article. So in the beginning part, we've got the overview. We talk about what MuleSoft is, why you guys can take a look at it. Goes through the process, system, and experience APIs, how they interrelate with each other, and why it's a cool tool and why you guys should use it when you're doing enterprise level API development. We are big fans of it. It is a fantastic API tool, and as this whole AI data generation or AI data consolidation, data management process continues, everyone needs to be an API first organization, and tools like this allow you to be flexible and adaptable in this environment. And again, if you're just hand coding all of your APIs, like I don't know what to tell you, but it's 2020 was a while ago. Like 2010 was a long while ago. You guys need to get with the times. Yeah, there's a better way to live.
Take my interest to go alone.
Yeah. So the first piece. So Heroku has a whole bunch of toolkits built into its platform. A lot of them are data storage toolkits, and one of which is Heroku Redis. I'm not going to bore you guys. We explain what it is here, but it effectively, the very short version, is a key value data store. You use this for temporary caching of data, and that doesn't mean like it's small. Like, you can cache large amounts of data, but pretty much you're like, I need to park my data here. I don't need to really store it in the long term, but I need to park it before I pass it on, do something with it, whatnot. So it's particularly useful in application development for using temporary or ephemeral memory store in order to manipulate, do final data, or do inter-process data manipulations prior to committing it to a particular system or downstream where someone's going to look at it. You're like, I need to do some manipulations here, and I'm waiting on other systems to come in. So MuleSoft, this is perfect for MuleSoft because MuleSoft is like, think of it as all these little tentacles stretching out to your entire ecosystem. It's grabbing on all these different data points, and it's like, hey, I want to, I like, this system responded, I want to park this data because I need to combine it with this system over here. Where do I put this while I'm waiting for this to come back and whatnot? Heroku Redis helps enhance that experience. Now, MuleSoft does have some capabilities in doing some caching and data storage.
Thread the needle there for you.
Yeah, I'll tag you in. But it's like, but I'm gonna, like, Justin explains how this is set up. So if you look at the document, you can see we can attach Redis at every level of the API chain that MuleSoft has. But Justin, I explain what it is. The article's here, they could go into detail, but why? Like, why would I use this? Because people are going to say, well, MuleSoft, they could cache some data, like, why would I use this?
So I guess let me start with, we'll call it a couple quick admissions for people that are in the know on the products. Mulesoft does have its own memory store for its APIs. I believe it's called Object Store off the top of my head, but these are memory stores for each individual API. And so if you're looking at this diagram with the Experience API, these process APIs, system APIs, and attached Redises, there's a couple crazy concepts that become possible when you think about this creatively. So what MuleSoft gives you out of the box with these APIs and their independent memory stores, this lets you solve use cases like, I have frequently requested resources through an API. Everybody asks me for this thing, so I'm storing it in memory so I don't have to go all the way to the database to get it. I know it's wanted, I've got it there. If you have asynchronous jobs that you're running, because, and I'm going to try not to dive too deep into 3-layer architecture here. Experience APIs are going to be the APIs that your customers or partners would hit, driving their experience with you. Process APIs are your aggregators. They connect to all your different backend systems to make sure the right stuff gets pulled from the right place and gets sent back to the right place. The system APIs are just providing access to that specific singular backend system. So one experience API can call multiple process APIs. One process API can call multiple systems. You can see how it fans out. Every one of those APIs has a memory store, and it can cache the most frequently requested things. You can, on your experience layer, say, hey, I have a long-running job. I've got this set aside until it's ready. And then when they come back to pull, if it's complete, I can report on its status based on that job ID that I've held on to. Where Redis gets uniquely valuable, something that MuleSoft doesn't do and that I think is cool, is in the diagram we've showed Redis attached at every layer. And what I'm realizing in hindsight, I could have diagrammed a little better here, is it can be the same Redis.
Yeah,
so you can share memory caches horizontally and vertically in this diagram. So both process APIs could connect to the same Redis, which means depending on the type of information being transferred, you can get optimizations of data access for interplay between those two because the response is cached in a common location. Same thing for system APIs, same thing for experience. But then if you want to talk like very frequently requested resources and you want to short circuit your entire API chain, because experience calls process calls system, you could vertically connect your memory stores across several key systems so that frequently requested resources at the system level can be cached in Redis and immediately available at the experience level. So this is saving intermediary API calls, travel time, and like basically fast forwarding your data right to your customer. So the universal, go ahead.
Or to your large language model.
Or to your large language model. Thank you for bringing AI in. I do get tunnel vision when it comes to technology. So what's cool is you get universal transparency by sharing your memory stores horizontal across related but same level APIs. And you get like huge performance improvements by like fast forwarding data up to the experience layer by vertically sharing your memory. And this is not something that MuleSoft's in-house memory stores are designed to do. They really are for the more traditional thinking about an API in the vacuum use case. Now, Redis can augment those use cases by provisioning additional memory storage, particular configurations that you may need for your infrastructure. Like when we talk GDPR, things like that, where is this actually going to be held stored? If you need specifically regionally located memory stores, Heroku and Redis give you the ability to do that, augmenting MuleSoft for those most basic use cases. But I think the most compelling thing is actually being able to share memory stores across APIs. And that's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, is being able to share a single memory store across a complex API network, which is what everyone is finding themselves with, like with all these different tools and systems and apps that you buy and or build, like combining that and being able to have that capability where you're able to centralize temporarily some key data to then pass to your customer, your AI or downstream system, it's just going to be critical. And the thing is that MuleSoft out of the box does a great job of this, but the sharing across this complicated network is just not something that like you can straight up plan for. And it's already like, again, it's super simple to tie in with Heroku. And I think that's the key thing to take away, is that this is why these two tools play so well together, is because you don't have to, like, the problem is already pretty much solved for you. Like, the provisioning of Redis is
It's a point and
trivial.
click thing, which that's what I wanted to call out. Is anybody listening along, you'll notice we haven't talked anything about implementation, because we're not talking about building anything on Heroku. We're just talking about provisioning Redis and then letting your MuleSoft use it. So that's crazy what you can accomplish with that.
And again, it's like, if you want to, if this is part of a more complicated app and you've built an API on top of it that like MuleSoft is consuming, like, okay, there's some work there, but MuleSoft also could be your system API and can consume Redis. So really, you just need to prevent, like, this whole thing we showed you here, in theory, depending on your particular use case, is entirely point and click. Or it could be custom depending on what you need, but it potentially is entirely point and click. And this is the thing, people look at a Heroku and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna need developer. Like, I don't understand. They keep saying words like, I don't know what it means. Like, this is just provisionable hashing.
The system admin could do this.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we've talked about Redis a little bit, why it's important, why you guys should care. Before I move on really quick, Justin did just touch on this briefly, but the security thing where it's like, hey, we want to share all of our API data across all of our systems. If you're a regional player, like, that's fantastic. You don't have to worry about anything. But if you're a global player and you're worried about data residency, you can actually handle that with Redis. So you can, like, set up this infrastructure where you're like, I'm sharing all of my APIs across my entire network, but you also have deployments in different countries or different regions that are important to you that you can't share data with. You can also provision in a point and click fashion Redis in specific regions to be compliant. And again, that's
co-located Heroku and MuleSoft private spaces with that infrastructure provision side by side. And then you VPC peer it, because they're both ultimately AWS VPCs, which means you get secure non-public internet communication between your Redis and those globally distributed APIs. It's nuts. Anybody who got excited by that, contact us. It is as cool as it sounds.
No, it is as cool, because, like, you could literally take this app in one region and then just replicate it on Heroku. Like, it's already set up, and just be like, MuleSoft over here, point here, and then deploy in this location, and you're done. So once you prove out the concept in one region, you want to roll it out globally. It's, again, always depends on your use case. There's always caveats, but to use the marketing speak, it's as easy as point and click, right? So let's move on. The next section here, we're talking about MuleSoft and Heroku Postgres. And for you guys who pay attention to us, like, we talk about Heroku Postgres all the time. It's our favorite database, blah, 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 because it has Salesforce and Heroku Connect. Like, that's what it uses. we use this all the time. This is the way, this is the portal in which your data is able to be exposed permanently into your wider ecosystem of products that you have in your IT stack. So, Justin, we talk about MuleSoft, we talk about Postgres here. We kind of go into detail, SQL databases, whatnot. The diagram is a little bit more complicated. You got a couple of Postgres databases or a couple of schemas that you're
under the system APIs. Yep.
Under the system API. Why is this important? Why is, like, now we've got the data temporarily stored, so that we could consolidate it to pass it around. What do we use Postgres for?
I got to be honest. I come back to these articles I've written and I'm like, oh, I could have organized this conceptually way better. We should have started with Postgres, because the compelling point for Postgres is much simpler than Redis. At the end of the day, MuleSoft is an API mesh solution. I like to jokingly call it an API pass. And so everybody thinks of it for integration, connecting your existing systems. What is the one thing that MuleSoft misses out of the box for you to actually generate your own product? And that's data persistence. And I can't even tell you how many times I have conversations with people internal to Salesforce, and I'm like, hey, have you considered adding Heroku databases to this MuleSoft implementation so that you can just permanently store that data and then make your MuleSoft API like the data API for this data model? And somebody's like, wait, so like we could make a backend API product, like API first, API only, maybe, because at the end of the day, that's all a system API is, an API only backend product. That's not like, hey, I'm integrating somebody else's system or something that was already built. Like, we could actually build our own data model, provision it to a database, stand the database up, and wrap it in an API with MuleSoft. And I've created a standalone product. And I've blown some minds at MuleSoft with that concept. So at the end of the day, what this means is that you can build product with MuleSoft, not just integrate IT systems. Because once you have persistent data, it's like, what do you want to make? A to-do list? You design a to-do list data model in your database, you provision the database, your system API makes that to-do list accessible. It's now usable in any experience you want. And so I'm not even sure where else to take it from that. Like, congratulations, MuleSoft APIs can permanently store data now. That's the idea.
And I think, again, this kind of comes back to what we were talking about previously when we talked about AI. You guys got to start handling your data. This is the starting point. So if you're, the next section, we're going to talk about Heroku Connect, and I think this will just tie in to this point. So we'll just move down to the Heroku Connect side. So it's like when you're looking at handling this problem that 85% of IT leaders are trying to take care of with integrating with AI, but they found out their data is all over the place and siloed. This is the thing. MuleSoft stitches all your systems together through APIs. You can use Redis to temporarily share data across all of your different systems, leveraging MuleSoft APIs to then do some really cool stuff, whether it's data manipulation, whether it's passing it off to an AI, some other LLM in another system, blah, blah, blah. But you're like, all right, that's great. I could temporarily do this, but now I want to start storing, reporting, massaging, actually fixing my data, like fixing my inputs or making sure it's not garbage in, garbage out. And the first step of that is Heroku Postgres. And it doesn't just need to be Heroku Postgres. We've leveraged this one here because we're coming up with the vector database one, but Heroku also supports vector databases. They support graph databases that you could do too, and you can also tie that into your Postgres and tie into your MuleSoft. So it's like, I want to start consolidating and centralizing my actual day-to-day data into one spot, and I want that to be Heroku, so that I could start leveraging AI down the road or doing this other stuff. And so this is why Postgres makes a lot of sense. And if you're a Salesforce customer, Heroku Postgres makes sense because your Salesforce connects to AWS, connects to all of your other systems through Heroku Connect and Salesforce Connect. And that dumps data into Heroku Postgres. And that's another API, like seamless point and click configure API to take your CRM data, ship it over to Heroku, so that you can expose it to this wider world of APIs, whether those be experience for customer apps, whether that's system APIs for backend processing, shipping, ERP connections, whether it's just process APIs to tie into, logical rules engines that are API gated, that are talking to multiple different systems up to and including different types of AIs, maybe multiple AIs, maybe IoT device. Like, again, this is what all this is for. And you're able to cache that data and store it and really build an extremely complex application stack that normally would take like years to set up, to be honest, like with any level of this sophistication 10 years ago, and do it in the matter of months. Like, this is why
crazy
you guys should be looking like this. And sometimes, depending on like how many systems you're talking about and what you're trying to bite off, like you could set up this level of infrastructure, this level of sophistication, and bite off a little piece as a proof of concept in a matter of weeks, just to prove out that it's like I could get one system A, system B, this whole process talking to each other, and Salesforce talking to that, and trying it out and be like, oh wow, we got this set up in like 4 or 6 weeks. Like, let's get the rest of our 20 systems, put in place. Let's talk about retiring some of those. Let's centralize some of this data so we don't need to have all this stuff scattered everywhere and siloed, right?
Well,
so this is
I was going to say, when we bring Heroku Connect into play, I've got what I think is a pretty compelling vision of what's possible here. So we've talked about Heroku Connect a lot. The single point I'd like everybody to keep in mind as I say this next piece is, like, Heroku Connect is the only product in Salesforce's catalog or in their ecosystem that allows you to access data from Salesforce, either put data in or pull data out without worrying about consuming those inbound API limits if you're using a push strategy with your data. Because if you hit Salesforce's API, that's going against your inbound API limits, rolling 24-hour limit there, scaled based on your users. So under heavy loads or high traffic, that's not an ideal mechanism. So Heroku Postgres is the database to use with Heroku Connect. When you think of those two together and you think of that advantage specifically, something that's uniquely cool and appealing about MuleSoft, Heroku, and Salesforce together is on your Salesforce, you can have data that you want to share with customers. You can have an experience cloud that has your ACM, your MuleSoft ACM deployed. And that's the marketplace where people can request access to APIs and like be authenticated and given credentials to be able to use them. Those APIs being the experience, process, and system APIs you're seeing in the diagram. So that experience cloud is what lets them hit those APIs, which ultimately just trickle down to the Heroku Postgres database that has the data you synced from your Salesforce to serve it up without hitting your Salesforce API. So you're getting that scalability without worrying about your inbound API limit. You're getting the benefits of MuleSoft APIs and control through ACM. You're able to distribute those connections and tie in other systems with that data through the experience and process layers. But like in my mind, that's just such a beautiful package of like one Salesforce org, one Heroku instance, Heroku connecting data, completely offloading your integration burden to Heroku. And that's another thing we could have talked about in the last section that we didn't, is that idea of just because you have data in a source system doesn't mean you want to abuse that source system with requests to get that data. So having Heroku Postgres available gives you a staging place where you're like, hey, this data gets requested a lot and it's going to get hit by, I don't know, 30,000 subscribers regularly. I don't want to take my Salesforce down. So this is a separate infrastructure that can take that hammering and not slow down your internal operations. So you factor that consideration in, you factor the advantages of Heroku Connect in, and then you still use everything that MuleSoft gives you out of the box. Like, to me, that is so compelling. Just so
and the final section here, which are actually like really light on technical details, which is nice because the technology is complicated. We talk about Apache Kafka and PubSub models. When you talk about having a mirrored or staging database where you've got tier one key internal business systems that have data that are the primary source of that data that you need access to downstream, whether it's distributors, vendors, or customers, that are going to access it way more frequently, but need like high availability without bringing down your tier one system, whether that be your CRM, your ERP, or whatnot. Being able to stage that on Heroku, which could scale rapidly at the click of a button, is key. And so when you're looking at Apache Kafka, which again, I know this is for a lot of people who are tuning out right now because I just said a bunch of random words.
We're talking about spaceships, Mike. This is space.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about spaceships. We're talking about the Apache attack helicopter, right? That's like, Boeing makes some cool stuff. No, so effectively, if you've and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of PubSub models. That's pretty common in the industry. But when you're looking for real-time or effectively real-time data integrations for small pieces of data flowing in and out of your system, this is what you would like. This is
PubSub's the way you go.
Yeah, this PubSub's the way you go. And Heroku's preferred solution to that is Apache Kafka, which is one of it's
a leading solution as well. Like I would say,
it's a leading open source solution. You know, anyone who doesn't have like a proprietary system is using likely this. And again, Heroku, why you would use it, point and click for setup. It's really straightforward.
Very easy to provision and set up.
But Justin, when we talk about this, and we talk about, like, instead of me asking you why you would use this, because I think we've already discussed that, like talking about why Redis is important, talking about the staging database, and Heroku Postgres, and having the scalable infrastructure that doesn't potentially take down your tier one solutions. And aside from the fact that for a scalable PubSub solution, Heroku is, out of all of Salesforce products, is the only one that does this. Like, yes, Salesforce is a streaming API, but it is not on this level. This is enterprise grade.
And it is not a messaging bus. It is a streaming API, and there is a difference.
Right. So this is pretty much the only place you could do this. Where do you see plugging this in? Like, what's a realistic use case? Like that, we've got the whole thing. We got Salesforce, Salesforce Connect, Heroku Connect, Postgres, Redis. Now we got Kafka. Walk me through.
I guess let's talk about the vanilla flavor to begin with and keep it very simple. if you've already got IT infrastructure that's set up and connected on a pub sub model, and you want to bring that in to like what you're connecting at an API level with MuleSoft, there's some doing in that, because for the uninitiated, what a pub sub model is you effectively have a place where you send messages, typically called the topic. Publishers push messages into that topic. Subscribers read them and track which messages they have and have not already seen. And this is how you can go one to many. This is how you go near real time, is basically the sending and the receiving of the message are decoupled and buffered by this topic. There's some things that go with that, though. When you talk about an API trying to interact with a topic, topics don't make call outs. They're not live processing. They're basically passive data storage, very similar to a Redis. So a MuleSoft API could very easily make a call to publish a message into a Kafka topic, but there's not necessarily an easy way to say, hey, when something comes into this Kafka topic, I want to make a push to a MuleSoft API and call that out. So if that's what we're dealing with, Heroku, one, being the only place that you can easily provision Kafka inside of the Salesforce ecosystem, Heroku gives you that ability to build a lightweight subscriber, like a one dyno subscriber listening to a topic. When a message comes in, make that API call to MuleSoft and say, hey, this API, I wanted to let you know a message came in. So what you start doing is you start stitching your API integration mesh across all your IT and your pub sub integration mesh together. And if we're talking about true customer 360, access to all your data, feeding this to AI, if you have a rather comprehensive API mesh and a rather comprehensive pub sub mesh, and both of those things are two separate IT islands, you still have a data integration problem. So using Heroku to build those subscribers to then transition to API messaging, or having MuleSoft push messages into Kafka topics, lets you bridge those gaps and start bringing those islands together as well, which I think is really powerful and really important. That's in a nutshell, and I'm trying to stay on task here because I know I've already taken us a few minutes over.
No worries. I had to hot swap my battery anyway because my headset just decided to die. Like,
no worries.
But yeah, so I think again, like the takeaway here, just to wrap this up, because we've been talking about this for a bit, is that when you're looking at MuleSoft and you're looking at how do I go into 2024 and solve for AI, you have to solve for data. And the way you solve for data is you start getting controls over it and getting handles on that. And how do you do that? You start consolidating your APIs so that you can control where data goes into, how it comes out. And the way you do that is through MuleSoft. And then the way you really enhance its capabilities is through Heroku.
Yeah. If I could, I think it's kind of like a 3-step process. If you want to think about, I need to get a handle on my data to roll out AI. Step 1 is achieve accessibility to all your data, regardless of what system it's in. That's going to come from pub sub implementations or from MuleSoft API integrations that give you consolidated access to data from any system, the ability to consume it from any API, and start tying it together in a logical business sense. Once you achieve data accessibility, the second problem to solve for is data quality, like making sure it's uniform, that all your systems agree, and that you are going to be putting good fuel into your AI engine. This is where Heroku comes in, because you can do more elaborate transformations. You can stage that cleansed data in a singular place to then be ingested by AI. And then once you get to that final place of like, all right, let's actually roll out AI, you're talking about picking your data lake, whether that's, something like a data cloud or an alternative, and then rolling out AI on top of that data access. So if you're thinking about it in that like high level 3 plan, get access, get quality, then deploy, that's how I think these tools tie together. MuleSoft gives you access, Heroku gives you the horsepower to clean that data up, and then their connectivity with so many other tools in the ecosystem makes it easy to put wherever AI's final home is going to be in your IT stack.
Well, and then the final piece too, just to talk about it, is that Heroku is also a place to build. Like if you're building new things, new apps, like that's that's where you do it. So once you get your all of your data centralized and consolidated here, now you've got the infrastructure to build on top.
Well, and
It's,
you
I
know,
think-
you crack.
Jess, I gotta cut you off. Like I gotta cut you off. So
Give me 2 minutes. Shameless.
you don't have it.
plug
We
for the
actually
upcoming-
we
I
actually
already
don't
let
have
you
it.
know.
Okay.
So what I was going to say is that's what our next article is going to be. Experience APIs developed through traditional front-end frameworks, system APIs developed through traditional back-end frameworks, and MuleSoft at the process API layer, and how you can have a traditional development flow on Heroku that still has a lot of these advantages tying in MuleSoft. So that's going to be what's next on docket.
As everyone can see, you can't control this man, and like he can never stop talking. It's just
No.
impossible. So
You have so many great ideas.
great ideas, he says.